Hello and welcome to today's episode of pianoTV. I'm your host Allysia and the sun is like really streaming in here. Hopefully it doesn't get in our way. Today's video is all about the top 300 list that classic.fm radio station creates every year with the top 300 favorite classical compositions based on a variety of voters. So this year in 2018, about 120,000 people voted on what their favorite famous compositions were, and Classic FM does this whole program and plays through all of the top music. Of course, we don't have time to go through all 300 today, but I thought it would be fun to highlight the top 10 selections. Now, this is a worldly poll, so this is the opinion of classical music listeners from all across the globe, what people right now consider their top 10 favorite classical compositions. What we're going to do is we're going to listen through these compositions and then in descending order. So we're going to start from 10 and go all the way to 1. And you'll be able to listen to examples of 8 out of 10 of them. There's a couple that I couldn't find the audio for. For those ones, you'll have to just head over to the blog and check out the YouTube video I've linked for them. Let's get started. Before we begin, I just wanted to mention a couple things that I found interesting about this list. So first of all, Mozart is the most popular composer on the list. There's something like 23 of his compositions on the list of 300, which is really no surprise that Mozart's super popular. The most popular movie soundtrack this year was Schindler's List by John Williams, which beat out Howard Shore's Lord of the Rings for the first time. John Williams also has the most entries on this list out of any living composer, with 12 out of 300 being his. Anyway, I just thought those were interesting little tidbits before we got into the countdown, but let's do that now. Coming in at number 10 is Misereri by Allegri, which is a composition that was written in the 1600s in the Renaissance. It's a religious composition for 9-part vocals, and it's really lovely. And unfortunately, this is one of the ones that I'm not going to be able to share with you on the channel. But again, hop over to the blog and you will be able to find a link to that, a YouTube video that you can watch. One of the legends about this composition is that apparently Mozart, after hearing it only once, was able to then write it all down from memory. And this is not a simple composition. This is like a 12 to 14 minute long composition. Number 9 is Mozart's Clarinet Concerto K622 in A major. This is a concerto that was used in a movie called Out of Africa, and that's probably one of the reasons it's on this list, because that movie would have popularized it for people. An interesting thing about this concerto is that Mozart wrote it in a relatively immodest way. Now, concertos are generally written for a star performer who's a virtuoso and does like all kinds of crazy cadenzas and stuff, but Mozart really minimized that for this one. It was actually also one of the last things that he ever wrote before he died. Number 8 is Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, dubbed choral, because in the final movement there is a gigantic choral section that you've almost definitely heard before. It's very famous. It first debuted in 1824, and it's a completely huge piece of music. It's about 70 minutes long, and its hugeness was really unprecedented for its era. Number 7 is another Beethoven symphony. This is his 6th symphony, dubbed pastoral. It's dubbed pastoral because it really does bring to mind images of peasants in the countryside, which is kind of what Beethoven had in mind when he was writing it. This sound story is complete with a little passage in the middle that brings to mind a thunderstorm. Pretty typical of Beethoven to have a stormy section. But overall, it's a very joyful piece. And for a third Beethoven composition in a row, we have coming in at number 6 is his 5th piano concerto with the subtitle Emperor. This concerto was written during a time of musical transition between the classical and romantic eras, so it's very forward-looking in the sense that Beethoven's starting to break away from classical tradition in this composition. The nickname Emperor comes from one of Napoleon's officers who commented that this was an emperor of a concerto. Number 5 are the 14 Enigma variations by Elgar. The most famous of these 14 variations is titled Nimrod, and in German, Nimrod is a word related to hunter. This is a really serious piece that's often used at funerals or other very solemn events. And now we have a couple entries from Ralph Vaughan Williams, who was an English composer. Number 4 is his Fantasia on a Theme by Thomas Tallis. Vaughan Williams was an early 20th century composer who studied with guys like Ravel and was really inspired by Ravel, and was written during a time of this inspiration. This Fantasia premiered in 1910, and it's a 15-minute performance for string orchestra. It's inspired by a melody by Thomas Tallis, hence the title. Vaughan Williams was really inspired by Renaissance music and melodies from that, and Thomas Tallis was a Renaissance composer. So basically what he did for this composition is took a Renaissance melody and improvised on it a whole bunch of different times, which is what a fantasia means. The other Vaughan Williams piece on this list is called The Lark Ascending, coming in at number 3. This was actually last year's number 1 selection, and sadly, another one we don't have a recording of, but again, hop over to the blog, you will be able to find a YouTube video if you want to listen through this one. Actually, I encourage you to do that with all the ones on this list so you can listen through the full performances instead of just the tiny little clips we have here. This was written in 1914 and depicts the story of a bird. It's also inspired by a poem of the same name. In this composition, you can practically hear the countryside and listen to the birds soaring in the air, represented by strings, and it's just overall a really lovely composition. Coming in at number 2 is Rachmaninoff's number 2 Piano Concerto in C minor. This was actually the number 2 spot last year and has consistently been a composition that's held a top position on these classic.fm lists. It was composed at the beginning of the 20th century and is widely considered to be one of the best piano concertos ever written, which is part of the reason it probably keeps appearing on this list. Rachmaninoff actually dedicated this to a physician of his because he had been going through a tumultuous period in his life with depression, and this physician helped him through that rough patch, and this composition, among others, was the result. spot goes to, ow! I just dropped a drum roll on my leg, but my rings hurt me. We're not gonna drum roll. The number 1 spot goes to Tchaikovsky's 1812 Overture, which is apparently a first-time number 1 winner. On the Classic.fm list, there are 14 other pieces by Tchaikovsky, and all of them increased and went a little bit higher than they had been before. So apparently this is the year where people are really digging Tchaikovsky. Tchaikovsky himself didn't really love this overture, which I find kind of interesting. He said he wrote it without warmth or love, but then it just went on to become a huge hit anyway. Probably because it's completely insane. Like, it's a very bombastic composition. It's got a huge symphony. It's got a big choir, but the craziest thing about it, and I am not joking, it actually features cannonball firing. And if you're watching a performance of it outdoors, they might actually even like fire a cannon when indicated. And you wouldn't think it's a crazy composition like that when you listen to the first few seconds like we're gonna share with you here. So I highly encourage you to check out the whole thing. It is a wild party. That is all for today's video. I hope you enjoyed this list. I really enjoy listening to Classic FM. I have the app on my phone, and when I saw it come up at the beginning of April, I thought it might be an interesting video that I could share with you guys. Sorry the lighting is so wacky today. It's springtime and things are, you know, my normal video recording time has turned into this like sunsetty blur. It's like 6:30 in the evening right now, so it's starting to hit that point. Anyway, I'm kind of rambling. You don't need to know any of that. Anyway, thank you so much for watching today's video. Subscribe if you haven't already. Give it a like if you enjoyed it. And you can come hang out on social. Follow the links in the cards after the fact. And you can also check out the blog post linked below where there will be videos for all 10 of these. See you later. The sun's creeping on me, guys. I'm gonna like be slowly inching my way across the piano room as it chases me.